So on the server side, here we have a RESTful controller, right, called widget, the widget controller, which has some hard-coded list of widgets, right, widgets 1 through 4, different types, heading, list, paragraph, and image. And we've created a RESTful API, right, that allows us to create new widgets, retrieve all the widgets, retrieve a particular widget, be able to modify a widget or delete a widget. Right? We haven't actually implemented all of them, but there's a couple here that are implemented. And I believe this is running, right? And we can hit it through the API, so it'll be localhost 8080, and then API/widgets returns the list of 4 widgets that live there. Yes? Right? So we want to be able to have this React application use this Java server, right, that retrieves the data. Yes? All right, so let's try and see how we can connect these two worlds. Okay. All right. So one of the ways that we could do this is that the this widget list component, and I guess a better name for this would be widget list component. Let me actually rename this widget list component. I'll just rename it. Refactor, rename. Rename everything. Okay. Let's see if it still works, if I break anything. Refresh. Okay. One of the things I would like to be able to do maybe is that we need somehow to kick off the HTTP request out to the server, right? That we need those widgets from the server. Right? Actually, we know how to do that already. Right? We can use fetch to fetch the widgets, but the problem is when do we kick this off, and how does the reducer know that these widgets came through? Right? How do we notify? How do we make it into the widget reducer that this state, the initial state of this reducer, should be what's on the server? Right? The biggest challenge is that the communication between these two worlds is going to need to be asynchronous, right? It's going to be asynchronous, right? Right now, these widget service that we have here that we implemented, notice that they're all reading from this hard-coded JSON array, right? And they're all just manipulating that array of widgets, right? It's adding to it, it's retrieving it, it's retrieving one, it's updating it, it's deleting it, okay? Right? And they all return right away, right? All the code here is synchronous, right? All the code that is calling this services currently is synchronous, meaning we call the function, we wait for it to return, and then we continue. That's exactly what's happening in widget reducer. What are we doing? To update this widget, we're saying service.find all widgets. We wait for this to come back and we assign it to widgets. So by the time we reach line 4, widgets has been assigned. And then we then go on and initialize the state for this widget. So by the time we get here, widgets has an array. Make sense? We can't rely on find all widgets going out to the server because the server would be an asynchronous call, right? We send the HTTP request, and we don't know when it would come back. It may never come back, right? The server might be down. Okay, so we need to take that into account. Right? So how do we do that? All right. So what we're going to do is we know that the find all widgets. We know that find all widgets is not going to use this array anymore. It's going to necessarily go out to the server to fetch data. Yes? So we know that this is not going to be this array. Instead, it's going to have to do some kind of HTTP request, go out to this URL, so that it can retrieve this array. Yes? So let's try that. Right? It will look something like fetch. So create a URL request, go out to this URL, copy, go out to that URL. Okay, and for instance, let's and notice this is an implicit return. This is an implicit return, so it would be assigned to who? It would be assigned to this widgets. Yes, we would expect that that widget would be that array that comes back. Unfortunately, it's not. Right? So let's try and rerun this. So it's complaining that the widgets that it's getting to it is not actually it's actually null. You know, I'm trying to iterate over this array of widgets, and it's null. It's not there. We can look at the inspect here and see what's going on. We can look at the network, and we can refresh, and we can see. Notice right here. See this? This is going out to the service. See that? If I hover over it, these two queries are going out, and they're actually successfully retrieving it from the server. See that? It is indeed going out to the server. And if we step through this and go out to the reducer, and we'll put a breakpoint over here. Put a breakpoint over here because that's where the query starts, right? Right after. If I refresh, if I hover over my widgets, notice that I don't have the array. See that? I don't have that array as I would expect the array to be there. Instead, it's a promise, right? A promise. Did we talk about promise? Right? So promises allows us to handle asynchronous requests, right? What we get back is a function that we can register a callback and say, hey, notify me at some point later, right? When you have these widgets, okay? Once I have the widgets, then I would like to be able to do something like this: state is equal to the widgets that came back, right? But alas, I can't put this inside of a promise handler because I need this function to be declared. You know, somebody else needs this function, right? So somehow I need to, by the time I get to the reducer, the widget should already exist, right? So, and I would need to just notify the reducer, hey, these are the widgets that I got from the server, right? Okay, so that's not going to work. All right, so I know I have these fine old widgets, but that's not how we're going to call it. All right, so what we're going to do is the following. We're going to have the widget component, the widget list component. This is where it should all kick off, right? When this component tries to render, right, it should notify, hey, I need data, okay? And that we can do in a couple of places, but in one particular place that we can do it is right on the constructor, right? Unfortunately, this is a stateless component, so I'm going to switch over to a stateful component, not because I need state, right? Only because I need a constructor to let me know when I'm constructed, right? So let's do that. I'm going to convert this into a class, and this is going to extends React component, okay? And we're going to put this inside of a render, and the render is going to have a return, and the return is going to be my div. Okay, so now I can convert this into a constructor. Here is where I'm going to be notified that I have been instantiated, right? I'm alive. I need widgets. Give me some widgets. Okay, we'll need a super here. Okay, a couple of things might change here. Notice that these widgets we were grabbing it from where? From properties, right? That were being passed on to us, right? Presumably from a reducer. Yes, right? So that's still true. That's still true. It comes from the properties, but the syntax changes a little bit. It's this dot props, right? That's where widgets live, right? In the properties that is being passed on to us, right? Same thing here. Right, this is not just widgets. It's this dot props dot widgets, and now we're back exactly where we left off. Yes.
Should we have the constructor be constructor props and super props?
If I need props, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So let's do that. Thank you. So this will be props and super props. Yep. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do here is that here's where we can notify to kick off the whole process, right? What we're going to do here is that somebody's from the outside. I'm going to keep it as stateless as possible. Still, this is still stateless, okay? Even though it's using this other syntax, right? Notice that I don't have state anywhere here, right? I'm only rendering whatever properties are being passed to me. Yes. I'm going to kick off and say, hey, from the properties, I'm going to notify somebody that I need widgets. I need widgets. So I'm going to call, somebody's going to pass me a find all widgets, right, and I'm going to call it. Right? Again, it's somebody else's responsibility to deal with this, right? It's not mine. Right? So a place that I can handle this is where? The container. The container, right? The container is the one that maps data. It's extracting widgets from the state and it passing it to me as a property. Right? It's already doing that. But it also can handle events outside of the container. Right? It can receive states. Right? It can receive state from the outside, and the component can generate events going out. Yes? Right? And the container is responsible for mapping these two things. Right? It's responsible for mapping state coming from the reducer into the component properties. It's also responsible for mapping any events leaving the component and going towards the reducer. Yes? Right? It's responsible for the two-way communication. Right? So we already handled the data coming from the state coming from the reducer into the properties of the components. That's what this state to property mapper does. Right? It extracts the widgets from the state and it maps it into the properties of the component. Now we're going to map it the other way around. Okay? Presumably the component is calling this function, is generating this event out from inside the component. So we need to map that. We need to map that and handle it. Okay? So to do that, we're going to need the other mapper, right? We're going to have to map a property to dispatch mapper, right? That's going to say that somehow, just like the state from the reducer went into the component, we need the events leaving the component mapped into calling the reducer, right? And the way we call the reducer is to the function dispatch. Right? So again, the connect provides me the two-way communication. The connect provides me the state so that data can flow into the component, and it also provides me a function, a callback, right? So I can call the reducer, right? So the two-way communication, right? So it says, okay, what do you want to map to what, right? What do you want to map here? Okay, well, I want to map the component has a function, is calling this function, find all widgets. It's calling that function. What do you want to do with it? Right? Well, the simplest thing is this, I can just call the reducer, dispatch. I can just call the reducer. All right, that just calls the reducer. This is going to fail because it's, I need to, by default, I need to at least pass an object that has something here, right? A JSON object and that object needs to have at least a type. Okay? Right? Ever still with me? Right? I'm only notifying the reducer that something happened. The component said something. Right? So this actually is a good place where we could go fetch those widgets. Yes. For what? Oh, that? Yeah, I haven't decided yet. Actually, it would be great if I follow this naming convention. Something like, find all widgets. That's what the component is saying. Okay. All right. Excellent. But this would be a perfect time to use my fetch. Right. To go fetch those widgets, and let the reducer know, hey, these are the widgets. Right here, these are the widgets. Notify anybody who wants the widgets, right? From the state, right? That the widgets are these. Okay. So let's do that. Right. We'll need the service. We'll need the service from where is it? Services and what was it? Widget services. There it is. And we'll create an instance. We'll say const widget service instance will be service.getInstance. There we go. And now we can call here, instead of calling dispatch, before calling dispatch, right? Well, let's leave that here for a second. what we're going to do is that we're going to use the widget service, find all widgets, What's that going to come back with? With a promise. Yeah, it's going to come back with a promise, right? And what are we going to do with that promise? We're going to register a callback. Right? Presumably that callback will be the widgets, right? Hopefully coming from the server, right? And what do we do with those widgets? We can now call our dispatch. We can call our dispatch and notify the reducer that the widgets are these that came back from the server, right? Now the reducer will know what the widgets are, right? And then the reducer can then notify everybody else, right? We'll put it in the state, and it'll propagate through the store, through the provider, down to the components, right? Down to the containers, and down the containers down to the components. That make sense? All right. Yes.
Do you call it the payload?
The payload. Yes. Actually, yes, you reminded me of something. This find all widgets, the first payload that comes back is actually not the widgets, right? It comes back with a response that has some metadata, such as whether it was successful, any cookies, a whole bunch of headers and all that stuff, plus the body of the payload, right, encoded as JSON, as a JSON array. So yeah, thank you. So this actually, we're going to pre-process that response. We're going to pre-process the response, and we're going to extract the JSON that is inside of the body payload that is coming back from the server. Thank you. So what comes back is a promise, right, that I'm going to give you the body, right, not everything else, right? All right, excellent. Right, so here's where the dispatcher now knows that I'm getting a widget, right, and I'm passing the type of the event is that find all widgets, right, and I'm passing you the actual widgets that came back from the server, right? Now back in the reducer, right, before we leave here, notice that we have the state mapper here. We also need the property mapper here, right? We're gonna as a second argument in that order, right? The connect expects the first parenthesis here expects two arguments, right? The first one is the state mapper, and the other one is the dispatch mapper. Okay, in that order. Okay, so it'll know, who, what to call when to invoke that, right? So back in the reducer, these widgets now, the default, the initial state will be empty. Right? There won't be any widgets to start off with. Instead, the widgets at some point will come back from the server, and notice we already had a case here, switch case for find all widgets. This one's going to be called, and what are we going to do? We're going to return a new state whose widgets are the widgets that are in the action, right? Remember, we put them in the action, right? And we're receiving it here, so the widgets will be action.widgets. Okay. So let's try this again. Let's see what we broke. All right, that looks promising. Notice that it says widget 1 through 4. I believe those are indeed the widgets that came back from the server, right? These widgets, widget 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? And they made it all the way to the reducer. The reducer put it in the store, right? In the state. The state went onto the store went to the provider went to the containers, the containers went down to the components, through the mapper, and then down to the properties that the component needs. Everybody okay? They're still with me? All right. All right, excellent. So we were able to connect a server providing a data all the way down to a component who's rendering it. Everybody good? All right. Now let's play around with this idea, right, of additional operations, such as being able to create new widgets, edit widgets, delete widgets, do all sorts of other things. Again, all through the server. All right? Excellent.